Welcome, welcome. Come on in. So happy to see y'all. Come on in. Come on in. Yeah. Welcome. This is the National Speakers Association. Be a better speaker. Tell me where you're zooming in from and who's coming to Winter Workshop next week. So excited. Let me know where you're coming in from. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Yes. Hey, Harriet from Philly. Hey, Paula. Yes. Yes. And even if you're coming virtually, let us know. I can't wait to see y'all there. Hey, Mohammed. Hey, Corbin. Hey, Victoria. Hey, Sylvie. Hey, Michelle. Come on in. We're going to get started in just a minute. You're in the right place. Hey, Liz. Great to see you. Hey, Carol Ann from Boston. For those of you coming to Winter Workshop, who are you excited to see? This will be my first in-person Winter Workshop. I'm so excited. Come on in. Welcome, welcome. Yes. Yeah. Oh, Liz, you are so right. Tom has been crushing those interviews. Peter, welcome. John, welcome. And let me know if this is your first NSA experience. Let us know. We welcome all of our friends of NSA, and welcome back to all of our members as well. We are going to be starting in just a minute. And with Jess Pettit, I'm so excited for this session, y'all. Oh my gosh, Paul's joining us from a cruise ship. Now that's dedication right there. I love it. Oh, thanks, Liz. Appreciate my flowers. All right, just a minute, y'all. Yes. All right, everyone come on in. This will be a great session. There you go. Hey, Jess. All right, it's about that time. Hey, Lon, it's so good to see you. Hey, Maura. Hey, Kenneth, Shark, long time. All right, we are ready to get started, y'all. Hey, NSA, welcome to our Be a Better Speaker series. It's so great to see our members here with us today, and all of our friends who aren't members yet. Hello, welcome. Let us know in the chat if this is your first NSA experience. We're so happy to have you here. We've got some great conversation in the chat going, so keep that going. If I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, my name is Maureen Mahoney. I'm the Director of Online Learning for the National Speakers Association. NSA is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping professional speakers like you thrive and influence by giving you the resources and the community to build better businesses and be better speakers. And you can learn more about us at nsaspeaker.org. So before we get started, just a couple of things. We got Winter Workshop next week. You can still join virtually. I mean, you can still come in person too, and we'd love to see you, but we're just about 1 week away. So come and join us virtually if you can. Our next Build a Better Business is going to be the Thursday right after winter workshop. It'll be March 3rd with our board chair, Mike Staver. He's going to be talking about coaching, what to do and what to avoid. And as always, every single Wednesday, we host a clubhouse room. Those are on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. So anybody who's new to the speaking industry and have questions about how to get started in the speaking industry, that's where you can ask those questions. So I want to let you know that we have a whole space for that, to ask all your questions. So that's a lot of fun. So here's what you can look forward to today. Our guest speaker is Jess Pettit. Woo! Our program will be about an hour, 45 minutes. So we're going to give you plenty of opportunities to ask questions throughout the program. So feel welcome to put your questions in the Q&A because we want to keep the conversation going in the chat. So keep the conversation in the chat. If you have any questions, put them in Q&A because I don't want them to get lost. So we can make sure we get those to your questions. And as always, this session is being recorded. You see there's a little record button at the top. It says it's being recorded right now. So you'll be able to view this. The members are able to view this on your NSA on demand. If you log into your member portal, there's a little tab that says NSA on the demand in the lower left-hand corner, and you just press that and it will take you right into our NSA on demand. And then you can view all of our recordings. So without further ado, put your enthusiasm in the chat and please welcome Jess Pettit.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It is super exciting to see an active chat. And I want to start off with a story that I think we will all be able to relate to, but also is going to set the tone for kind of what we're going to be dealing with today. So, number one, I am at a hotel. I am on the road. I'm not doing a humble brag, but I want to make sure that we know that this is information that I have put together after 20 some odd plus years of making a ton of mistakes for you specifically. So this is not my typical topic. This is not my typical audience, etc. It's being recorded. It'll be stored, as Maureen said, in the digital vault. I want there to be plenty of time for questions and answers, and as they come up. The reason why I wanted to start this way is that 2 days ago when I checked into the Broadmoor, which is a fancy schmancy resort, and if you're going to get locked in anywhere during a impending snowpocalypse, it's a nice resort with a good spa. Highly recommend. Anyway, when I checked in, if you've never been here or if you've never been to a fancy resort, they make you feel like Cinderella. So they take all your stuff away, they just disappear, and they show up and I get to the room. And the guy who's getting me to my room spent 10 minutes telling me about how the television works and the DVD player and it's probably not a DVD player. I'm proving my point right now. All this stuff, there's a television in the bathroom. I don't watch TV. So it's completely wasted on me. Not really. I was like, okay, got it. Thanks. It's after midnight. Can I go to bed now? I don't watch TV. So the guy eventually leaves. I give him a tip, whatever he leaves. And then I'm like, wait. Is there a fridge? Because I eat food. So I was able to chase it down in the hallway, find out where the fridge was, etc. The reason why I want to start with that is that today we are talking about embracing a wide audience. Today is about empathy. It is not about a lot of other things. It is about recognizing that there is information that you can do in advance that will actually help you engage and embrace a wider group of people than you are currently doing. Now, first assumption, that does not mean that you are doing a bad job currently. It is a possibility that you could be doing a better job. That's what empathy in this case really means. Number two, this is not the format for self-promotion. Now, at NSA, and some of you are not members, and I'd highly recommend it, but I think it's a really important thing to understand that I want to talk about real mistakes that I know I and real speakers have done, and it's going to make people feel vulnerable. Some of you are going to get defensive. Some of you are going to get triggered. And for the record, that's actually my job. But it is not the place in the middle of a very vulnerable space to then self-promote. So please don't put self-promotion stuff in the chat because it's going to land even harder because I know what's coming. You don't. And I want you to have a little bit of empathy. and like practice as I lead you through a ton of information. I want you to be able to practice thinking about your own business, your own content, and what it is that you're doing, not making more business or trying to get more leads, because your mind and your heart are just not going to be in the right spot. So hopefully that is helpful. Don't do it. Number 3, 7, 8, I don't know what number I'm on. Have a texting number that I want to give to everybody I possibly can, because I want, when you are in the moment, if you have a question, you can ask me. Now, I actually have real legitimate friends on this call right now who are probably calling my shrink, like, do you know what she just did? But I want to give you this texting number so that when you actually have a question, you can ask instead of just assuming that what you're doing is probably good enough. Now, I approve of good enough now. Notice that's not self-promotion. It's just who I am. It's about being good enough. But the texting number, ideally, get your pens out. And Maureen's going to type it into the chat, but it's going to go by really fast. But the texting number is 202-670-4262. It's a Google Voice number that automatically sends to my cell phone. For those of you that are interested, it's a free service, and you don't have to give out your actual cell phone number. But 202-670-4262. You're welcome to text during this or when you're watching the recording or later on when you're thinking about something, and I will do my best to respond. Now, one of the things that we're going to talk about today is asking questions in advance. So I think it's important to mention that I posted in the member and the non-member specific NSA Facebook groups saying that this is coming up. Do you have any thoughts or comments or questions? Email me, send me a text message, whatever I can do to help. And I have received a ton of text messages already, and a lot of them really are more about how to get started as a speaker. And again, I'm happy to be supportive. Luckily, people were supportive of me when I first got started. But this isn't the space for that. So what I want you to do is to think about what you are currently doing, not aspirational, but what you are currently doing. And is there something you could be doing better to embrace a wider audience? Spoiler alert, the answer is yes. If at any of that stuff, you're like, this is not for me, that's fine. End meeting, leave, go away, watch the recording later, watch somebody else. But that's what we're going to do for the next bit of time, is talk about what it is in your entire business cycle that you could be doing that could embrace a wider audience than you are currently doing. And this is the same thing for virtual, hybrid, live events. This is the same thing for sales and marketing. This is the same thing for billing and invoicing. One of the things that I think that my business is actually pretty good at is that every touch point along the way, my personality shows up. Now, yay, that's good and consistent, because if you don't like my personality when you're trying to schedule an appointment with me, you're probably not going to like me on stage. You should probably go hire someone else. And it's a disqualifier, but it is also showing that I am very aware of who I am and how I am, and I am consistent with who and how I am along the way. So for those of you that don't know me, etc., that might seem kind of like a lot, and I encourage you to figure out who you are and how you are. So before we can start talking about how diversity or equity or inclusion or belonging or community building, how all of that can show up in embracing a wider audience, I do want to kind of like back up one step just in case. Some people may be wildly new to this conversation. When I was getting some of those text messages and I was also asking questions of my friends, sometimes it's really hard to think outside of your own expertise. So something that I've known for a gazillion million years might be brand new information for someone, which is why in order to embrace a wider audience, you're gonna need other people. Even as a solopreneur, I'm actually a dog person. I'm not a cat person. I'm wearing a cat sweater because it's a cool sweater, but look at me embracing a wider audience, even though I'm a dog person. See what I mean? You're gonna have to think outside of yourself and outside of your expertise. So to get started, I want to talk about what is typically referred to in the diversity world as the Big 8. Now, the Big 8 are 8 social identities that we all have, and you need to be aware of which ones you have. Now, I talk about politics and controversial subjects and stuff all the time. So somebody somewhere is like, I don't understand why we have to talk about identities. We're all just people. Right. But we're talking about being embracing of an audience that's different than us. So we're going to have to know like what home base looks like. So if we know what home base looks like, then we can actually think about the people that we don't represent. In this case, knowing your own identities is super critical. So the big 8, you can Google them if you want more research on this, but the big 8 that are generally thought about or referred to when we start talking about laws, either on a federal or a state level, are race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, religion and spirituality, nationality, and socioeconomics, status, or class. So of those 8, I would encourage you to just take a second. Now, some of you are already like, oh, fire hose. I got notes. You are welcome. This is a fire hose. Get what you pay for. But what I need you to do is to think about where you identify racially, ethnically, what's your sexual orientation, what's your gender identity, how are you physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually able or not currently, what's your religious or spiritual practices or lack thereof, what's your nationality, and what's your socioeconomic status or your class. Now, if you, I'm crossing this off, if you can know some of those, then to embrace a wider audience, what you're going to need to do is to embrace things that are different than you. But you can't embrace things that are different than you until you've done a little inventory of who are you and then what's different than you. When you can handle kind of what those big identities are and what your identities are, then you can actually think strategically about the team that you use, the vendors that you use, and how this fits in with your own business practices. So, for example, as a diversity person, I very often am accused of being a liberal. I'm not a liberal. I am what Glenn Beck would refer to as a pinko commie, flaming liberal. That is true. So to counter people who may have whatever assumptions they have about my political affiliation, one of my business practices is that I only pay US-based labor. So any project that I do, I'm only using US-based labor because people aren't expecting that. They're certainly not expecting me to have like patriotism or patriotic like viewpoints as to who I hire. Now, my pinko commie liberal shows up in that I also only pay US people a living wage. But those are my business practices and my policies because I'm thinking about who am I and who am I not. So as we go through, I'm going to be recommending some different people who are experts in areas or can possibly help you. I am not making any money off of them or anything like that. It's not self-promotion either. But it is also hopefully an example of how I intentionally use folks and use vendors that are different than my own identities because I need their lens on the thing that we're creating together because they're outside of my expertise. And because they're outside of my expertise, which is why I hired them in the first place, and they're different than me in whatever kind of strategic ways, that's what I'm trying to do. So that's kind of the idea of knowing your identities and your team's identities so that you can use your team's lenses. So just in case, the big 8 again is race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, religion and spirituality, nationality, and socioeconomic status or economic class. So there you go. There's your first homework assignment. Who are you and how are you with other people? When you know you can actually work on other people that aren't you. When I roll out on stage, there are people who instantly have a story about me, and that's totally fine. I need to know what that story is so that I can accommodate that story, the parts that are true, the parts that are not true, but then I can also represent other people because we're actually talking about engaging what might seem like a tricky audience. Or maybe you have kind of a boring topic and you're trying to become more captivating or more engaging. Okay, so I call this the Trojan horse style, but what it really is the Trojan horseness is that I get people to like me who really aren't comfortable liking me, and then the people who were already comfortable liking me, they already like me, so I don't have to worry about them. So I'm already bringing some people in. Now, there's a question about what about size or citizenship or mental health status. So those technically are kind of rolled into those big 8, but they're also not actually connected to federal legislation, typically speaking. Nationality and citizenship kind of fit together. Generally speaking, when we start talking about size, it interestingly gets lumped into ability related issues. So they're kind of in there, they're kind of not. I don't know if you've ever worked inside of an imperfect system, but when we start talking about how laws work specifically in the United States, it's pretty broken, and it's a pretty decent system, and it's pretty broken, and so that's what we're working with. So those kind of things might matter. Now, as like if we use size as an example, as kind of a larger person, I'm already bringing that out on stage. When my buyers or my audiences, maybe they're a more conservative crowd, which is actually my preferred audience, then I need to kind of figure out how edgy can I be. So I might think about what clothes I might wear. Do I show my tattoos or I don't show my tattoos? Do I have to wear Spanx to this? Those kind of things are about how I'm thinking about how I'm going to show up based on them. Now, I'm not the only person who has these thoughts, but it is an important thing to kind of think about. And you need to know, again, who and how you are. And then you can actually think about the team that you work with and what it is they could provide that might help you not, or you be able to notice things you wouldn't have noticed otherwise. Okay, so with that, at the top of a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion conference sessions that are happening now, some of you may be familiar with this, some of you may not be familiar with this, but often there is a land acknowledgement. So I wanted to use this as an example that my guess is most of you are like, what did she say? Land who? What's going on? Land what? So a land acknowledgement is often when someone who has a microphone or the space or the attention of a space, a land acknowledgement acknowledges the physical land of that meeting that has been stolen from indigenous people, generally speaking, because that's how colonization works, but that's a different TED Talk. So this land acknowledgement is a great example, if you've ever been to a conference where they've done this, where you might be like, what's happening? What's going on? It doesn't have to be a problem you experience in order to be a real problem for someone else. When we start talking about land acknowledgements, we're talking about, at least inside of the United States, although it's relevant in other countries too, but inside the United States, a failed attempt at genocide of stolen land and broken treaties with people who are still alive and exist today, and you want to acknowledge that. So then whether they are in the room or they are a buyer or they have a booth in the exhibit hall isn't the point. But to embrace a wider audience is to recognize, where are you in space and time right now? So we started with who are we? Now where are we? So for example, if we take Nashville, because that's where Influence is in July. If you aren't coming, you should totally go. Who knows what color my hair will be then. But in Nashville, for example, a land acknowledgement would take East Cherokee, the Yukai, the Tula, and the Shawnee people's names, invoke them into the space, and acknowledge that we are on land that actually belongs to them, that has been stolen from them. I live in super Northern California in Wiyot country. And one of the other things that you can also do is you can actually pay an honor tax to the folks in your homeland or whatever it is you want to run your business. It's kind of like a tithing, so to speak. So it's 1% of your profits you would pay as an honor tax to the people who still are alive on the representing the land where you are, where you live, where your business is. So here's 2 websites. Maureen, I'm going to say them kind of slowly. If you can type them into the chat, that would be great, because I'm surprising you with this. So number 1 is, if you would like to know what land you are on and who it actually belongs to, which we can go on to another TED Talk, but what does it mean to belong land? But we're not doing that right now. But the land acknowledgement website to check would be native-land.ca. So it's a free website. You can also Google this, but native-land.ca is the website that you can type in, figure out where you live. Like, where's your home? Where's your home base? Where does your business come from? Then you can actually go to honortax.org. That website will actually help you see if there is a honor tax already set up for your area, Or maybe your business can do this on your own and you can start one for your own area. I happen to live in a place where there's already one set up. So then you just write a check and you get a letter and you get to turn it in for your taxes. So that is another kind of safe place to be starting. If we start with who and how we are in the world with our identities, the next place is where are you in the world? And what is the history of where you are in that place? And is there something that you need to be doing? Maura is asking, are you recommending doing land acknowledgements at your speaking engagements? Super great question. A lot of my colleagues would say absolutely every single time you speak. If you're a diversity person in this vertical, then you should start with a land acknowledgement. Similarly, you'll notice Maureen has her pronouns on her Zoom screen, and I intentionally don't. And it's very controversial. Welcome to Jess Pettit. But I don't, because I'm usually speaking to audiences where this is already very uncomfortable making. So I need to meet my audiences where they are at. And when I do that, then I can kind of push the envelope a little bit. But for my business practices, my pronouns are in all my social media, they're on my email signature, and I do an honor tax. So I know that my business is being taken care of, and we'll see if it's appropriate with that particular audience. And that's how I've chosen to run my business, right? So who would have thought I would possibly be like the soft glove person, but I'm about education and making things better. And I'm also coming up against a lot of defense, a lot of triggers, and a lot of reasons people are like, no, I'm not interested in this. So I have to kind of play that out. So, okay. So that's the next piece. Okay, next is when we start talking about kind of the tools that we often use, if we're talking about YouTube or Zoom or something like that. You can ask in advance if closed captioning is going to be made available, or you can click a little button and it automatically happens on YouTube. It doesn't mean it's perfect. You can think about those of you that have books. Do you have an audio book available so that people who either don't want to read a hard book or can't read a hard book, or maybe can't read in English in a hard book, prefer an audio book? Do you have an audio book available? Downloadable handouts or slides. If the meeting planner knows who their audience is in advance, which for the record, usually they don't ask these questions either, but your slides, if you use them, may need to be available in advance for people who can't see them in real time. You can also look at your own websites. Flash is kind of an outdated tool on a lot of websites now, but things that automatically play, autoplay or sound or things like that, is there an option to adjust that or to mute things so that they don't automatically play? Thinking about who you are and how you're representing yourself is a really important piece, but a lot of these tools actually have very simple things that you can do or utilize to make your content much more available. You just need to spend some time playing around in the background of the settings to kind of figure out what is available or what isn't available. So I just wanted to throw that out as some kind of basic ideas that you can do with what you're already doing, but it gets to asking the questions. And even if the meeting planner doesn't know the answer, they now know that they might be asked that question. Maybe they will ask the question in the future. So that is the kind of easy switches using the tools that we're already using. And then the last kind of acknowledgement, and then I'm going to take a breath and a sip of water, and we're going to check for questions. But the last kind of where are you at now, what tool are you using, and what's available inside of that tool. The other piece is what is happening in the world, right? So like read a newspaper, read a local newspaper, even if it's on your phone. What happened yesterday? What happened earlier today? How's, especially now, how is labor going? Can you thank the labor? Can you actually talk about the people who are in the room that often are invisible? Staff, local news, national news, international news. It is really important to understand that the folks that are in your room have access to real-time information, and usually the planner or your contact, they're not prepared to figure out how to acknowledge what just happened, but all you really have to do is just kind of say that happened and then move along, or thank the people in the room, tip your bartenders, those kind of things. You have the power on the stage to be able to use a microphone and tell people what it is they need to do. There's an example, and I know Liz is here and she was in the room during this happened, But there was an example. We were at a conference together, and a person who was like emceeing the event basically sexually harassed and objectified a young man from the Department of Education who was speaking prior to me. And she thought it was hysterical, right? Like, I mean, she's a comedian. She thought it was hysterical. And it went on a very long time, to the point that the room was really uncomfortable. But I was already kind of at the wing of the stage. So then I never got a chance to talk to the client, like, do you want me to do something about this? But it's imperative to do something about those situations, especially when you're really clear on who you are and where you are. So when I eventually took the stage, I just acknowledged that sexual harassment often goes towards women instead of from women. And as a comic, as someone who uses a lot of humor, it's really hard to know when you've crossed a line and when you haven't crossed a line. And that was inappropriate, and that shouldn't happen. And I'm sorry that it did. So now, to my keynote. It took 35 seconds. I had board members thanking me. I had a ton of people thanking me because I did disaster avoidance. Then they didn't have to mitigate any of that stuff because it happened in real time. But I don't know that I would have had the confidence to do that if I wasn't firmly grounded in who I am and how I am, and allowing myself to have some empathy for the people who are in the audience. That happened, and it impacted the room. They don't care that, like, lady, stop talking, my keynote minutes are flying by. They don't care about me and my keynotes. It's my job to do something so they can be back in the room, and now we can go. It really didn't take much, but I don't know that I would have been able to do it had I not been more comfortable with who I am and how I represent stuff on stages. Whew, gonna take a drip of water. So, Maureen, can you quickly, one, let me know if there's anything going on in the chat that I need to know, and then I will look at the Q&A while I'm sipping water. And I have 2 texts.
Ooh. We got some Q&A here.
I see that.
Yeah.
Anything in the chat?
No, everybody is calling you, saying, well done on your story.
Well, thank you. I screw up just as much as I do well, but I will take it. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll just do the Q&A really quick before we move on to kind of the next thing. I can think of many audiences that would be infuriated by doing a land acknowledgement, so it sounds like you're not recommending flaming your crowd. No, it depends on who the audience is. But I would also say, to your point, that I also have spoken in front of audiences that if I didn't do one, that would have been a problem. And so then this might be a good way to start a conversation about what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate. It's also possible that the speaker before you already did one, and so you don't need to do it again, but you can acknowledge that one has already happened. But that's a conversation that you would need to have. So great question. What about trans, non-binary person in the audience, or a cisgender person who has a trans kid that you're using your power to be an ally to? Are you selling your audiences short by assuming what they can and can't handle? What if it involves an identity that is closer to your heart or life? First off, great question. Second off, I have no psychic connection to every single audience member. So I am only working with what I think and I know. In my MBA program that I did during COVID, we talked about a business avatar. A business avatar is kind of who is the general summation of your common audience member, your common buyer. Does that mean that's everyone in your audience? No, it is a general summation. But using a general summation is kind of a good starting place, and then you have to feel things out in the room. So that applies to anything, not just trans or non-binary or whatever kind of ally or advocate work you're doing. The whole idea of empathy is acknowledging that there are people who exist who don't know how to do this, or there are people who exist who don't know you, or there are people who exist who totally do, and now they want to be pushed. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay, I'm going to do 2 more Q&As and then the 2 texts, and then I'm going to the next batch. Is that cool? Okay. Do you think that was so well received from you because it is seen as your expertise and would be received equally as well by someone there to speak on another topic? Excellent question. No, absolutely not. Somebody would not have probably ever been able to pull that off. And now someone's going to prove me wrong and be like, I could have done it. But in the moment, if for that to happen in the space where everyone is super awkward and you could feel the static in the room, and I'm going to come up about community and belonging and being good enough, there is no way I could have taken the stage, in my opinion, without addressing it. Could everyone do that? Probably not. Have there been other instances where I was so uncomfortable I didn't know what to say? Yes. Have there been other instances where I didn't even notice that something happened? Yes. All of those things are true. Remember, the idea here is that you can't like memorize a vocab list and then nail it. You just need to be consciously aware of who and how you are and where you are at. And then how does that show up? So then when you're thinking about your marketing materials, your sales materials, who your team is, using those lenses. This is why group work exists. So that one person is not like, oh, I think this is great. And then they put something out there. You need a group of people to be able to do this. So this is an example. This is how I get nervous when I'm like, okay, this example may be too much. But I was online shopping recently. Those of you that know me are not surprised by this. And there were green sequin leggings. Yes, please. That sounds amazing. I would love green sequin leggings. So when I went to put them in my cart, I started reading the comments. Well, it turns out green sequin leggings are the kind of sequins that when you flip them, the sequin becomes a different color. Lean in. I'm even more excited. Now I have 2 colored leggings. This is great. However, these leggings turn to red. So they're green sequin leggings that when you move, the sequins turn to red. Well, I don't know if any of you have seen the circumference of my thighs, but my thighs are likely to rub against the sequin leg, which means my legs would turn, at least the inside of my legs, would turn red. That product was not designed by someone who menstruates. There's no way you will ever convince me that someone who menstruates was like, oh my God, I have a great idea. That's not going to happen. This is why you need a team of people so that you can be like, excuse me, why don't they turn to like purple? If they turn to purple, I would have bought them in a second. Imagine them with this snazzy sweater. But they turn to red because someone wasn't thinking. So it's important to have other people help you do the thinking, but other people can't help you do the thinking until you actually know where you're starting from. So, okay, isn't there a 9th category, generational baby boomers? Okay, there are thousands of categories, absolutely. Generations, things like that, aren't actually considered part of the big 8, largely because there's only 8 of them. So, but the big 8 are derived from what is most common to come up in federal and state legislation. So yes, generations would totally count as an identity, and it's important to know that. I get the benefit in a lot of spaces of looking 12. I also get the kind of marginalization of looking 12, depending on which room I'm in. This keynote that I'm speaking at right now are medical executives, so they think I'm 5 years old. So then I have to like lead with experience or shock them with my experience. So even though I'm still the same age, I have to deal with the generational observation or assumptions of how old I appear based on my audiences. And depending on my audiences, sometimes I look like an old lady. I have a client that I look like a PTA mom. And then I have other clients that think I'm some 5-year-old, like really young person. That is the bonus of having this job. Better than a cubicle. Okay. What is the name of the product you use for texting? Google Voice. It's free because I'm cheap. I'm cheap because I buy things like sequined leggings. Okay. I have a text message that says, hi, Jess. Hello. Okay. This text message says, hi, catching your call live now. I'm a life coach and have been free workshops on work-life balance and burnout. My goal is to get more paid coaching clients. Same. I was paid for one of the workshops I did. How do you know if you should charge for conducting the workshops? Thanks. Excellent question. Not really on topic, but you should be able to charge for everything. We live in a capitalistic society. How much do you charge? Whatever the buyer will spend. Now that sounds like I got my MBA in COVID. Okay, we're going to move on to the next situation. Does that sound good? Yes, Jessica, that sounds great because y'all are on mute. So here we go. I did all that stuff. Okay. So now let's talk about sales language, for example. So the language that you use on your website or your marketing materials, outbound stuff is usually what I always think of whenever I have to name like sales stuff, because I like to think that this is the part I'm bad at. I'm not bad at it. I actually am quite good at it. I just mostly get inbound calls. I know, that's another NSA humble brag. I think I'm at 2 now. So my inbound stuff comes to me, but then how I respond is my sales language. My marketing, my materials that go out, the descriptions I use on YouTube, how I title the videos that are on YouTube, the things that I have available for aftercare, the things that I give away for free when I'm like auditioning up against you for a gig. That's all sales, marketing kind of stuff. So I want you to think about this. Whatever it is you have, that's what you have. So this is not the program for what do you need. And if it was, you wouldn't come to me because I barely know anything. So when it comes to sales language, I want you to think about your word choices. So for example, when you're trying to find out, are you a decision maker? A lot of times what happens is that I watch people gender this. Like, thanks, Pam. Is your boss available? Does he have any time next week? What you're trying to do is get to a decision maker, but you just gendered that the decision maker, 1, isn't Pam, and 2 is a man. So notice kind of the language that you're using. Maybe Pam is the decision maker. Maybe her boss, Barbara, actually will do whatever Pam wants. So Pam, even though isn't necessarily the decision maker in title, is the decision maker in influence. So you need to be careful about what language you use and what assumptions you're making. Also, fun facts. When you are on somebody else's Zoom, you don't know who's there and who's a hidden video. You don't know how they have their settings up. So the second you zoom in to Zoom on someone else's account, you need to think that the biggest, highest ranking decision maker is lurking in the background. Now, I generally like to think that I talk like as if that's happening because I can be responsible for most of the things that I say. But I want you to think about that because that was actually a differentiator. Can you use inclusive language? When I invite people to my Zoom, I always say you can invite anybody you want to. Here's the link. Share it with anybody who wants to come. Sounds great. Now that's my approach, but I want you to think about the word choices you use. Inside NSA, when I served on the national board, Ruby was the president who was a woman while I was serving. So every president that I served under was a man. Well, every association I've ever worked with, every board I've ever served on, I call the president Madam President every single time because it's rarely accurate. And because it's rarely accurate, that's actually the point I'm making, isn't it? So for all the people who served as presidents, when I was on the national board of NSA, they were like, why is she calling me Madam President? What's going on? But they knew who I was, right? So they know it's a term of endearment and I can't stop being me. So I'm going to call you Madam President. And it was only relevant once, but it was relevant all the time, depending on what your kind of mission is. Does that make sense? So notice your language. When you start thinking about your selling tactics and the consent to sell, I very strongly at the top of this stated 0 self-promotion. Now, it's not because like, yo, this is my time in the spotlight. I'm not selling anything today either. But it's because I wanted to take care of my audience and I knew that that would hurt the tone if I make people feel vulnerable or empathetic or making them ask questions or bringing up things or identities that are really important to them. I didn't want someone to look like a douchebag. Now, I haven't been paying attention to the chat because I'm talking, but maybe someone already did. Don't do it again. But you can set up those standards by taking care of your audience, but you also need to be able to ask for consent for what it is that you need, which is why Sales 101, like, can I call you next week? Yes, now you can call them next week. The same thing goes, you don't want to assume that the people care about you at all. That is why it is called sales. It doesn't matter how important your thing is. They don't know about you yet. That's why you're reaching out to them. If they've already reached out to you, they already have some kind of process and you're somewhere in their process. So instead of trying to like persuade them, just check in on their process and how can you help? How can you support them? Because you know who you are and where you are. That'll help you a lot out with your language around sales, around your marketing. Also, like your content calendar. One of my mastermind groups, Courtney Clark, is a super organized, very systematic human being. And she has a blog content calendar. It is intimidating to me because I mostly vomit type. And then I give it to someone on my team and they like spell check it, etc., and put it up there. But when you're thinking about your content calendar, also think about when it's posting. If you have things automatically scheduled, the woman who schedules all my stuff, her name is Haley. She's delightful. But she knows I don't care about social media. And two, if I send the little fire alarm icon, she knows pretty much whatever she's doing right then, she has to go and cancel any of the automatic posts that are happening. Because in my line of work, it would look very insensitive for me to post some kind of inspirational diversity thing when yet another person has been murdered by a police officer, when something controversial is happening, when a Supreme Court decision has come out, because the people who are on my mailing list know I'm paying attention to those things. So even though it's automated, I have to look like I'm paying attention. So paying attention to your content calendar, as well as like the holidays or things that people are celebrating in those particular areas that are bigger than you, is a way of being able to kind of pay attention. So also, this is a big one for NSA. Look like your headshot. I know that that sounds really weird, and maybe in this COVID-y time, it's less relevant. But if someone is meeting you in the lobby or someone is meeting you at the airport, they think you look like the picture you sent them. Look like your picture, because you're having to deal with someone else who doesn't know who you are. Also, we do a lot of like money flexes, right? So like we want to look like we're very expensive and very busy. So we will dress up usually like one step higher of people that we haven't seen yet, but we had to pack 3 weeks ago for. So then it's a really good opportunity if you're going to present yourself in like a 3-piece tailored suit, for example, then I want you to think about the other images that you might use if you're using PowerPoint, or some of the examples you might be using, or maybe show up and look like you've been on a travel day or something. Like you get to be a human, but you also can use that as an opportunity to identify with other folks. So I was on a webinar the other day, very like high-end business insurance topic, etc. And the presenter right before me, one of the most powerful slides in her deck was of 3 people sitting at a card table with those plastic lawn chairs in the back. And she was talking about business continuity plans. And I was like, this is a genius move for embracing a broader audience, because she looks hella expensive. She's talking about very large numbers, very big clients. And here, the most important slide in her deck is what looks like kind of a small family-owned business of some sort in discussion. And what was so smart about it is she knew who she was, she knew what kind of client she's been talking about, and she used an image of a different kind of client. So all of a sudden, everybody in the room was actually embraced by her stories, and her images. So I want you to think about those things, because we often flex our CSPs or whatever our kind of like gig load is, or like, oh, I'll be flying in from blah, 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 whatever. We do this, but then we're actually marginalizing people as well. So can we flaunt it and also embrace people at the same time? That's a weird balance, but I think we need to be far more intentional about doing that. So that brings me to kind of a team thing. So I identify as a almost 48-year-old white woman. That is who I am. My ideal audiences tend to be mostly white men. Now, some of you right now are like, well, that's not who I am. That's not who my audience is. Great. When you get up and do a webinar, you get to talk about you and your audiences. So just apply this to you, right? So I am a white woman, cisgender woman. I am, meaning I'm not trans or non-binary. Cis is a Latin prefix, meaning congruent. I just realized some people may not know what that is. And Lisa Konecki is here, so I want to make sure that I tell people what cisgender means. Hi, Lisa. Okay, so if I am a white woman, and most of my audiences are generally white men, and especially the audiences I'm targeting tend to be white men, that's like my ideal audience, then when I think about my team or my vendors, I've never been a white man, right? So I need more white men to be able to look at my stuff. Ideally, they would be somewhat different than me. They're from a different part of the country. Maybe they have a different politics. They have a different view on things, different interests. But I intentionally work with people that fit that rubric, because when I look at my headshots or my website or my marketing materials or my demo reel or the videos that are being edited for YouTube, I want the people who are like, oh, I like this one, to be that kind of audience. Are you following me? It may be very different than most of you, but that's who and how I am. So, for example, Phil Reinhart designed my website. So, prior to doing websites, he was like the vice president of human resources or something. That is a job I have never had nor wanted. And it's perfect because I need that lens on my website. So, he designs my website as he sees me from the lens that I don't have. So I highly recommend him. I think he's great. Phil at philreinhart.com. You're welcome to go reach out to him if you want. He does not know I'm saying that. So when I get to my videos, all of my video editing, all my demo reels, everything are all edited by Matt Bauer. Matt at motivationalmedia.net, not com, .net is his email. You can go to his website, motivationalmedia.net. But he does all my editing. Why this is particularly important is I've also worked with Matt for almost 20 years. So he actually gets my sense of humor, he understands my approach, and he's able to actually build a demo reel that has an arc that is compelling to white men because I am not one. But it also can kind of be just edgy enough that it actually builds curiosity in the audience that I'm trying to target, which is, for me, the most important thing of a sales piece of collateral is I want them to be curious because what I want them to do is get on the phone with me. That's what I really want. So you're welcome to use Matt if it fits your demographics. He does demo reels for all different kinds of people and stuff, but feel free. Motivationalmedia.net. Then somebody asked me on text is who did I use for my headshots? I use John D'Amato for my headshots, pictures of my book, things like this. And the main reason why is he doesn't use Photoshop. The reason why I think this is so important is that not only do I look like my headshots have not been altered in any way whatsoever. He just takes a really damn good photo. So I highly recommend him as well. But you'll notice that's 3 white men. I'm a diversity person, right? So you'd think that I'd be more like intentional in hiring a more diverse audience. But I'm hiring these particular people on purpose for a very specific reason. So when I am challenged, I know what that reason is. And I know how that reason fits into my entire sales strategy. So if I need to, I can have a conversation. I have had very high level conversations with vice presidents of sales because they also need to be able to be that clear as to who they are targeting and who their business avatar is so that all the choices line up. So I'm like, actually doing what I'm saying. And that is a really important piece that I would recommend you do because that's how you embrace a wider audience. Bing. All right. So once you have been able to kind of take responsibility for who you are, where you are, and who your team is, then we can get into kind of other people, other folks, other things that are going on. So that's pre-program, during the program, and after the program. So what I would like to do is take another sip of water, check back in with Maureen and see if anything questions in the chat happened. Otherwise, I'm going to read the Q&A. And as a reminder, you can text message 202-670-4262. Now, those of you watching the recording or later on, just save it in your phone. If I can do anything to help, I'm happy to help. So I'm drinking water. Maureen, anything important in the chat that I didn't see as they were all flashing by before I do Q&A?
No, everyone is saying how John is amazing and Matt is great as well.
Well, great. Excellent. So I don't know why Phil's not getting any love. He's also amazing. Okay, good to know. Let's see. I don't have any text messages. So then, okay. Hey, Jess, good to see you. Hi, Mike. Before you started to get people reaching out to you to book you, what was your process of outreach like? Email campaigns or inviting your buyer to be a guest on your podcast or doing a 10-minute demo? Just curious what worked for you. Thanks, Jess. P.S. You're hilarious. I didn't write that. Mike wrote that. Okay, so here is another example. I think I'm at number 3, NSA humble brag. I don't do outreach. I know. How lucky am I? I don't do outreach because I speak, and that's my main marketing piece. So I speak for free. I pay to speak. But when I speak, I usually get at least 3 or 4 kind of referrals or spinoffs from that particular engagement. So I have enough inbound stuff that I don't usually do a lot of outbound stuff. I attempted to have a podcast. Those of you that know me know that that was a disaster. I interviewed several of you for it. I don't know how to do this, and I don't care about social media, so it kind of didn't work. And I'm not a very techie person, and by that I mean I am not techie, i.e. my notes are handwritten. So I can't remember the rest of the question, but I didn't really do any of that stuff. Hope that's helpful. Probably not helpful, but that's the answer. Okay, do you target white men because they are the ones you want to help change? 100%. Not only are they the ones that I want to change, but they are also the ones that I get my sense of humor better. They pay me better. I enjoy them generally better. And to be completely frank, women are really horrible to women. And so I don't have to deal with as many sizeism comments or like, oh my God, I can't believe you wear pants. I don't have to deal with that. So I do speak to women. I am capable of speaking to women. As a lesbian person, I can even date women, but usually not clients or audience members. But men tend to be more of the audience that I'm interested in, largely because we live in a sexist society where men are often in the decider roles when we start talking about recruitment and retention and workplace culture, organizational culture. And if my speaking, here's a little segue to the speak to consulting thing that Barry, Alana, and Liz were doing, but my speaking leads to the deeper work within an organization. And I need the people who are like, we need her. I need them to be the person who decides that they want the consulting. So that's mostly why I focus on men. And most of the men in my audiences tend to be white men because we live in a sexist and racist world. But that's a different TED Talk. Okay. Please re-explain the point of the powerful slide of the table and the plastic chairs. It's coming up. So, but I will do it now anyway. The idea was in this slide, so this was a very high-end presentation being done by very, very expensive high-end insurance people in the industry. So I was the next speaker, so I can't really tell you much more. So the woman who was speaking, very fancy, very expensive looking clothing, jewelry, hair, full makeup, nice background, fancy, right? Not me, certainly not in a hotel room. And the slide that had kind of the concluding point of her presentation, so like the one that everyone would take pictures of, etc., was 3 different people. Notice I don't say mom and pop store owners. I said it looks like a family owned or a small business sitting at a card table using plastic chairs that they're sitting in, and there's a stack of plastic chairs in the back. The people who were actually in the audience were all over the slate, solopreneurs to very high-end C-suite people. But because she was comfortable, in my opinion, of who she was and what she was representing and what she's selling, what she's talking about, the high-end people already feel included. So for the most important slide in her deck that everyone's going to remember, everyone's going to take a picture of, I believe she intentionally chose a different kind of business to make sure that like the embrace happened from both sides of the options of who were in the audience. So hopefully that's helpful. How do you find pro bono speaking engagements? Where do you go? Thanks. Excellent question. I say yes. Now, again, I have friends in this room who are calling my shrink again, but I say yes. I say yes to anyone and everyone who wanted to speak until I completely got exhausted from saying yes to free gigs. Then I realized people knew how to bake. This is inside COVID specifically. I don't know how to bake. So they didn't have any budget, but I was really worried about getting rusty because I wasn't getting on airplanes. So I said yes to a million things, and then eventually I made them mail me desserts. Now that's not typical, and I have the personality to pull that off, and I do like a good corner brownie. But the word kind of spread that I was available to do this in 2020. And so I did those I would call free gigs. A pro bono gig I would call one that I know that I'm not getting paid, or maybe I'm not getting paid what I should be getting paid, but I want to speak in them. So their audiences or who's going to be in the room or who has access could potentially lead to more business. So then I offer my services pro bono. Or I'll even use it as a disqualifier. Like I only do a few pro bono things in a certain period of time. You get to set your own numbers, and then we can have a better budget conversation. Where do you find them? like you can start basically anywhere. So when I started speaking to adults after leaving the college market, I like to call them grown-ups. Like a lot of people, I started thinking about Kiwanis and Rotary and other kind of groups like that that are in my teeny tiny rural town, and found them. And for like enchiladas and lunch, I spoke pro bono for them at lunch. But you need that stage time. I think we were actually texting earlier, the person who asked that question. I think we were texting earlier, and I know that like somebody somewhere often says that you have to do something like 300 times in order to be good at it. It's a book. It's somebody I'm supposed to remember, but I don't remember, and I don't name drop, at least not intentionally. But I actually think you have to do something almost 1,000 times in order to be really good at it. But I think that's coming from my stand-up background. So doing things pro bono or for free, that's all saddle time to me. So I think that that's a really important thing. So hopefully that helps. No Q&A. I do have a question that came in. You thank you, Cheryl. So, you rock. Please remind people that it's okay to speak for free or even pay to speak to get bigger contracts. 100%. The bonus of being self-employed is you get to pick what you want to spend your time and money doing. The horrible truth about being self-employed is that you get to pick how to spend your money and how to spend your time. It's really terrible. And it's also wonderful. So there you go. Hopefully that helps. Another Q&A. Do you have a favorite topic to speak on? Basically everything your grandmother said that you are not supposed to talk about. That's my favorite. That one. That thing that you're like, that's my favorite. That's my super favorite, which is why I'm not good at opening receptions, because I'm like, 2022, big year for abortion. What are your thoughts? No one invites me to parties. I talk about controversial topics, politics, current events that directly impact workplace culture, because these things are happening outside of the organization, and a lot of people at work like to pretend that they're not happening. I mostly focus on associations because it also impacts member recruitment and retention as well as staff. Has the pushback against anti-racist teachings impacted your work? Excellent questions. I often get told that when something is in the news that like, oh, your phone must be ringing off the hook. My phone is generally ringing off the hook always, so I don't notice any particular difference. Although I did find out that I'm fancy enough, my book is being banned in a small county in Texas. The irony of that is that I am a native Texan. So I did find that out. It's like a badge of honor. I feel like I should put that on my resume. I'm pretty excited. All right. So we did sales and marketing. Are we ready for pre-programming, asking, program, post-programming? Nope, there's more questions coming in. What are your criteria for choosing pay to speak opportunities? Lynn, I don't know. It totally depends. Can I pay my bills this week? No? Sure. Sounds amazing. Now I have created a disqualifying rubric for myself this year because I'm trying to be kind to myself. But I also have enough consulting clients that like my bottom line baseline is covered. So for example, I don't like doing virtual gigs while I'm on the road. Anyone want to start playing Alanis Morissette? I am in Colorado Springs doing a free gig for NSA in a hotel. Yep. So number one, NSA is like the original Brokeback Mountain for me. I cannot quit you. And I said, yes, I would totally do this. And then I got this gig and we're making it work. So the bonus of being self-employed is the only people that I have to really address this to are my dogs. And they think every idea is great. So here I am. How much do you pay to speak? What is reasonable? It totally depends on who's the audience in the group in which I'm paying to speak. I also will try very hard to like double book a place or work with a consulting client in person that's in a town that is related to a gig that I might be speaking at, that I paid to speak at. Do you use your book or your online courses as aftercare to sell after your keynote? Sure do. I will attempt to do as much aftercare as I can because I think it keeps you top of mind. I also, perhaps this is relevant to some of you, but I deeply care about my topic. And so I'm hoping like 1% of the audience is actually learning something and going to behave differently. Yes, and I have clients that are totally not interested in aftercare in the teeny tiniest little way and don't care at all. And I try to make it available. So what do I mean by aftercare is I actually heard the phrase from someone else in NSA, and I don't know who it is, so I did not create it, but it's somebody, and it was a great idea. So the idea is that what do you do to kind of keep in their system or in their universes so that you're still around? Because a lot of what I do is like crisis response as well. Being around or being in your pocket kind of fits with the kind of work that I do. So I have like 52 videos, for example, that are free. They're on YouTube, and I make the playlist available. You can also Google it on YouTube and go find it and see it yourself. I have books or reflection journals or facilitation guides. Most of my clients don't really want any of that. So they might want like additional webinars or next year's conference. And to be honest, most people don't want anything at all. But I just make it available so that I have it if I need it. And then I repurpose those same tools when I'm doing consulting work because I already have created the stuffs. Okay, let's see. No text. Okay, we're going to do 2 more Q&A, and then I'm going to go back to my 3 more Q&A, and then we're going to go back to doing my outline. Okay, I do a lot of work with women's groups. I'm training my brain that just because it's a women's event with a few righteous men, there's air quotes around that, in attendance, I need to make sure I'm making those that may be gender expansive feel welcomed and safe. Any suggestions on language to use for addressing groups? Excellent point. So first off, if you need to say something that is gendered, and what I mean by that is usually like men or women or something like that, masculine, feminine, if you need to do something like that, first off, why do you need to do that? And if it's relevant, okay, so then maybe say women before men, just because they're not expecting it, because we kind of wrote, say, men and women. Ladies and gentlemen, this is really the only time that women usually come first in that particular setup. I try really hard not to say anything gendered. I'm terrible at this, and you are all going to point out every time I've said you guys or something like that on this call. But I try to say y'all. One thing Texans got right is y'all is gender neutral and plural. So it works out well. So I try to say y'all. Being able to be mindful of who is in the room. When I do speak at women's events, and there's typically like 1 or 2 people in the room that I would identify as not a woman, I also don't call it a women's event. They called it a women's event. I don't call it a women's event. That's them. So then I'll just say like, hey, y'all, are y'all ready to go? Or are you ready to do this? One thing I really think is important is that you don't want to say, hello, ladies, and the 3 men. Are you all lost? Like, they are already very aware that they are at the space that they are in. You don't know how people identify, and you don't need to call that out. Same thing goes if you're in a primarily white audience and there's very few people of color in the room. You would never say like, hello, white people, and the few brown faces that I see. You wouldn't say that because you're actually marginalizing people versus embracing people. So just be mindful of your language. Okay, there's a lot more Q's and A's coming in. Mark Goldman in the chat says, I just say friends. Fantastic. Okay. Which platform would you recommend selling e-course books and content? Zero idea, and I am totally the wrong person to ask that because I barely sell anything and I have no idea. There's a million of them out there, and there's people who are like way more experts than me. No idea. Anything I have is available for free on YouTube because I don't want to have to deal with yet another platform I have to water. Okay. Hey, I knew cisgender, but I never heard of honor tax or land acknowledgement. What other terms and words do we all need to know that we don't know? So Lori, first off, excellent question. And number 2, it's an impossible to answer question. Kind of the Marissa Tomei situation, right? Like it's an impossible question to answer because they didn't make that CA in 1962. That's my terrible Brooklyn accent. Don't do that either. So what is a good example in your question, though, is that some of the things you do know or you're familiar with, awesome, gold stars. And some of the things you are unfamiliar with, awesome, gold stars. That will continue for the rest of your life. You need to know what you know, and you need to work on knowing what you don't know. And the largest topic are the things you don't even know you don't know yet. I don't really work in vocabulary lists. So there's a lot of things that everyone needs to know, including me. And so that's why it's ongoing learning, and you have to figure it out and learn along the way. And listen, and when you hear something, then you go from there. Carolyn's asking, can we say humans? Sure. And it's also kind of vernacularly weird, right? So if you're doing it, like Carolyn's a really phenomenal MC, right? So you could be like, hello, lovely humans. That's amazing, right? But if you're like, hi, humans, like you have to have the like, ugh, whatever, I don't know how to spell that word, behind it while you're trying to be inclusive. And are you trying to be inclusive or are you showcasing that you're confused? Does that make sense? So that's what you need to do. So someone said chutzpah. Excellent. I don't use the word chutzpah because even though I lived in New York, I am from Texas and I did not know that word until I moved to New York because Texans, at least the ones that I hung out with, didn't know that word chutzpah. So I don't want to misappropriate language that I didn't grow up with. Okay, how do we handle the you guys as y'all sounds bad coming from my northeastern self? Carolyn, great example. As a northeastern person, you may not be able to pull off y'all, but you might be able to pull off yo humans or hello humans or whatever. I can't pull that off. Know you and know where you're at and guess and hope for the best. That's the best strategy. Now, the key is, and I'll talk more about this summer, spoiler alert, I'm keynoting Influence if you'd like more. But that's not promoting me, that's promoting you should go to Influence. The key thing is that you're going to guess and hope for the best, and then you're going to be responsible for whatever it is that happens. That's the key. So, how do you handle non-English speaking audience? Excellent. Thank you very much. That's actually on here. So, Julie Holmes and Tracy Stuckrath both introduced me to something that is called Hey Mike. It's a little gizmo that you clip onto your clothing. And then I watched Tracy do this at a conference. I emailed both of them to walk me through the process because I bought my Hey Mic right before COVID and then I haven't actually used it. But the Hey Mic is like a microphone that you connect to your phone through Bluetooth gremlin things. And then people in your audience can actually use some kind of QR code situation. Again, not a techie person. But then when they use that QR code, it connects the audio that you are saying and closed captions to their phone in real time in whatever language they pick that are available through Ava. So how does that work? I don't know. But I did see Tracy do it and it looked amazing. And I bought my Hey Mic through Julie Holmes. So hopefully someone in the chat can help you out. But that's what I would typically do when I have audience members that don't typically speak English. Most of the audiences that I have where there are people who aren't speaking English, not only do I speak English, but I speak rapid fire English. So even working with sign language interpreters, I try to meet with them in advance and tell them like some of my non sequitur jokes that are completely customized for every single audience because I say this joke every time I keynote. I'll tell them in advance because signing some of my jokes is harder. So if I make some offhanded Star Wars comment, the sign language interpreter may actually have to go back through and explain what Star Wars is and explain what Harrison Ford is and explain that recently he was in a plane crash. This actually happened when Harrison Ford was in a plane crash, so that I give them a heads up ahead of time. Languages, most of my clients provide language translators for the people who are in the audience who don't speak English and warn them that I speak very fast. I also make myself available. I'm getting a little bit ahead, but pre-programming wise, look, maybe I'm not ahead. I'm following, I highlighted it. But I ask if there's sign language interpreters or language interpreters being present. I ask if they want me to use the Hey Mike or Ava thing. Like I said, I bought it right before COVID happened, so I have never used it with a live audience. But if there are language interpreters or sign language interpreters, I offer to meet with them in advance. Similar, if I was facilitating a panel, I meet with each individual person on the panel before the panel. So we have a little bit of a rapport and they kind of get a vibe of what I'm going to be like, even though so much of what I say kind of feels off the cuff and is about today's news. It gives them a chance to at least go Google the story. Okay, I forgot what question I was answering. Does saying folks work when addressing the audience? Sure. And also, no. It depends on the audience. Some people would think that's too casual. Some people would think that that's too hokey. It just depends how you do it. So you're going to have to guess and hope for the best. Ladies and gentlemen is way out of date. Not always, and sometimes. It just depends. Okay, please suggest that we stop using the phrase rule of thumb, technically from when men could beat their wives as long as the branch or switch they used was no longer thicker than their thumb. Takes me right out of the experience when I hear someone speak. Okay, excellent example. So the other thing that I think is really important is There are idioms. Some people don't know what that word means. So idiom, IDIOM, I believe is how you spell it. Um, if there are idioms that you kind of use or you grew up with, just Google them and find out where they came from or what it means, and then stick to it or edit it out of your language if that's a story that you're not interested in. So rule of thumb came from, like this person was saying in the chat, that the thickness of a switch that you are allowed to beat your wife with. So that can be triggering in a lot of ways, literally, for people in your audience. So maybe don't say that. Maybe you're actually talking about sexual harassment, sexualized violence, and abuse. And so you actually do want to talk about it because you want to talk about the history of the term and how the idiom has infiltrated our language into common day vernacular. And people don't know that that's actually an idiom that's rooted in a violent history. Maybe you want to tell that story. So instead of like, don't ever say this, just know why you're saying what you're saying and what the history is. And then notice the theme. Guess and hope for the best, and then be responsible for whatever it is that happens. All right, that's that question. I still don't have any text. The texting number again is 202-670-4262. Are there any other, Maureen, in the chat that's been going, not the Q&A, are there any questions in there, or are people doing pretty good at putting them in the Q&A?
Yeah, their Q&A is great. Yes.
Nailing it.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so last Q&A, and then I'm going to go to the last three things, and then I'm kind of opening it up as the plan. So how do you deal with disrupting people in the audience? Luckily, I have a stand-up comedy background. So I kind of grew into very drunk people, largely from New Jersey, who just got fired that day, heckling me from the audience. So I am completely unfazed by this now. I've gotten very used to it, so I would highly recommend it. I also think that you can go to events and be a participant and watch how people handle it, but also how would you handle it when that happens? What would you do? And practice and role play by yourself in your living room before you need it, so you kind of have those skills sharp. Okay, I am looking very quickly. More language that should actually be thought of, and Donna Mack gave me like a long list of things. I am consciously working on this as well, but looking at the words crazy, lame, or insane, those actually have meaning and could also be really off-putting to people in your audience. So unless you actually are talking about a mental health situation, you may not want to use those. And if you are talking about a mental health situation, you might want to use the word a mental health situation instead of crazy, lame, or insane. So I promised her I would say that. Okay, so learning disabilities. Okay, so here is a good thing for you to think about, generally speaking, when looking at your language, your examples, what your stories you're telling, the language that's on your website, etc. There are some people who are very detail-oriented, so they're going to want that stuff. There are some people who are very idea-oriented, big picture, so they're going to want that stuff. And there are some people who don't care about any of that. They just want to be told what to do, action-oriented, or told what not to do. Like the comment earlier, like, what words do I need to know so I don't offend anyone? I have no idea. But if you can balance between details, ideas, and actionable or inactionable steps or recommendations, you're going to be able to kind of address some of the different types of people who might be in your audience. It is also important to notice that some people might need to read, some people might need to talk out loud, some people might not want to talk out loud. When you are doing activities or some kind of engagement, again, for pre-programming, I would encourage asking the client connection. Is there anybody in the room who's not going to be able to insert your directions of your activity? 9 times out of 10, the client has no idea. So then your job is to get there early enough to kind of sense out people, or just guess and hope for the best and actually try to include more inclusive directions. So for example, the woman who keynoted right before I got onto this webinar, she had an example where she wanted people to stand up if they agree and sit down if they disagree. So then she included in the slide that was directions that stand if as you are able, or raise your hand. So this is right after lunch. This group is super loves each other. I assumed there would be lots of participation, and most of the room just did their hands instead of any kind of standing. but then standing for the people who could stand became like emphatic, right? So like you raise your hand, you raise your hand, you raise your hand, and then you stood up. But they kind of created that on their own. She also did something where you held up 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 fingers. So first off, not everyone has 5 fingers, so how are you going to deal with that? And she used an image of what this would look like. And then she made a joke, if you're only going to hold up 1 finger, be careful which finger it is. So guess and hope for the best and be responsible for whatever happens is probably almost always going to be that answer. But you can ask in advance about participants, participation. People who have a hearing loss, it's the most underreported disability in human behavior because we don't like to admit that we can't hear because it's associated with getting old. I'm not a psychologist, but that's my guess. So I highly encourage you using amplified sound, even if you don't think you need it. Most of us are super loud, but there's a microphone. Let the microphone do its job. Bill Cates gave me some of the best advice ever. I was speaking at a thing that was at NSA, and the room was very long and skinny, and I ended up kind of shouting into the microphone. So the sound booth can like control the volume, right? But I was exhausted afterwards. And so he just recommended like you let the mic do its job, but then I also would encourage let the mic do its job, right? So it's amplified sound, and if you're using kind of your natural voice, the AV team, if there is one, can actually increase the volume. Notice what I just did there too. When I said the AV team, if there is one, I have spoken in basketball courts on a karaoke machine in the middle looking at stands of people, and the NSA humble brag is like, ask the AV team, blah, blah, blah. Not every room has an AV team, so how are you going to adjust for that? And again, part of the reason of getting to the room early is test out where the microphone works, where it doesn't work, how long is the cord. Are you going to use a lav? Where are you going to attach the little box if you're going to use a lavalier mic? Like being able to ask those questions. Those are your problems, not the client's. So I always encourage getting there early. You can ask the questions even if they don't know the answers to them. You're still ultimately going to guess and hope for the best and be responsible for whatever happens. The other piece that I want to talk about as far as content is your quotes, your history, the history of the language or the history of the research projects or assessment tools, the stories that you are telling, the statistics that you are using. I want you to Google them, the ones that you typically use. And I want you to Google, and then here, it's free. I want you to go to like page 6 and find out what has come up around that quote, that history, that person, statistics, research, and for your assessment tools. So when we start talking about people, there's all different kinds of people who can both be a terrible person and have done great research. A terrible person and have created an incredible assessment tool. A terrible person and said something really smart one day. Like, you need to be responsible for those particular pieces. There's a story that I used to tell as a recovering alcoholic. I'm 18 years sober. You're welcome. That I had in common with Martin Luther King is that he was also an alcoholic. So the joke that I used to use is the bonus is that I wasn't assassinated and I was able to get sober. Now, again, this is a little flavor of kind of how my speaking goes. And what was fascinating is that even in movies, his own letters, his journals, I've done all kinds of archival research on Martin Luther King. I very much identify with him because of our shared alcoholism. This was a very important revelation for me, and it does not land on my audiences because you're not allowed to say bad things about people that we have idolized. But there are also quotes or histories or stories or things like that that people are using that you don't know the full history about people. And that's on you. Do your homework. If you really like that quote, what's the history of the quote? Where did it come from? Was it taken out of context? Has it been misquoted? Who's the original person who said it? Because it's possible that person Y wasn't the first person who said it, but is the popular person who's getting credit for saying it. So go all the way back. When I use a lot of sociological studies, or at least I did originally, and most of the sociology studies I was using were actually stolen from Jane Addams because women couldn't even be professors at the time at the University of Chicago when the research was being done. So of course, a man got credit for it, and I was quoting the man because that's the person who published the research. Do your homework. So when I quote Jane Addams now, instead of whoever it was, I don't even remember now, because I deleted the name from my brain, I'm actually quoting where the research really came from. Also do an inventory. Again, we started with what your identities are. So intentionally use quotes and stories or things like that that are representing identities that you don't have, because then collectively you're embracing more and more people in the audience. It's not just about don't quote white men, although it is an interesting thing that most of us quote white men because most memorable quotes are coming from white men because that's what happens when we only listen to white men. There's nothing wrong with white men, but it is also possible that there could be another quote by another person that you could intentionally be using to diversify who you are representing in your talk. And there are also times where that quote by that white man is super, super important, even if you identify as a white man. Now you need to look at your other slides or your other collateral and see kind of how you're embracing a broader audience than the identities you have. You are in charge. You get to pick. You get to do whatever you want to do. So this is in the actual program itself. Looking at your PowerPoint, the images I shared about the kind of smaller business with the plastic chairs and how important and how like significantly different it looked than the rest of the slide deck and the person that I was presenting. It's such a great example. I want you to look at your images. I want you to look at your fonts. There's a website where you can use your own handwriting and make it a font. I thought this was the coolest thing ever because I have terrible handwriting. Does anyone notice the problem there? I have terrible handwriting, so making my terrible handwriting into a font is basically illegible. I thought it was amazing because it's my handwriting. So pay attention to the fonts that you're using. Some people also don't see different colors, so paying attention to how you're using color on your slides. One of the coolest things that I was not expecting that I would highly recommend is I already identified myself as a flaming pink Okami liberal, so I argue with Rachel Maddow quite often because she's like super conservative compared to me. So I listen to Rachel Maddow show largely while I'm driving. So I can't see the images that she has up while she's doing her live news broadcast. And it is such a powerful example of what happens when you don't describe what the image is. So I'm driving around and a lot of her jokes, the image is the punchline to the joke. But if she doesn't describe it, then I miss that. And it was a great learning lesson. I mean, I rarely use PowerPoint anyway, but if I'm doing an online webinar, I might be more likely to do it. Or if it qualifies for continuing education credits or something, you have to say exactly the same thing all the time. Plus, you notice I speak like a fire hose, so it keeps me on track sometimes. But the power of describing what is in the picture, when you set up your PowerPoint, you can use alt text as you're setting up the PowerPoint, which actually describes what's in the picture. So then if people are getting the deck and can't see, then their reader machines will actually read and describe what's on the picture. But you need to be able to do that. If you have handouts, making them available as PDFs or Word documents also help with those readers. Again, Donna Mack is the expert, in my opinion, on this area. She also does website audits. So if you're interested, look up Donna Mack. She's an NSA member, but I highly recommend her. When I recorded, well, I didn't record. I have a checkbook. I paid someone to record my audiobook. But one of the things I did before I released the audiobook is I asked like 10 people, some people who knew me, some people who did not know me at all, but were on social media, and several friends to volunteer to read, I'm using air quotes, even me saying using air quotes, because some people are multitasking, they're not looking at the screen. So I need to say I'm using air quotes. Listen to the audiobook in whatever way they needed to, and then give me feedback to make sure that I described things correctly. My book has a lot of activities and things in it. Are the directions clear when you're not looking at paper? I'm a super paperback kind of book person. I read constantly, but I read real books. I don't have a Kindle. I don't do audiobooks. So I needed, again, a team with a different lens to listen to it in a way that wouldn't be me, because I will never listen to my own audiobook because I like paper. But Donna was actually one of the people who reviewed my book, and it was super helpful because I was then able to hear how my audiobook sounded to someone who couldn't visually see the activities, even though they're on handouts and in the book. That's not how she would actually experience my book. So recommend a diverse team. I've already said that. I can't read what that is. I already talked about that. Okay, so that is the program itself. How are we doing on time? Okay, good job. We have a ton of questions in Q&A. Of 7 of them. I have one text. So Jasmine, hi Jasmine. I know this because her phone number is saved on my phone. Okay, sometimes things come off as trying, I'm using air quotes again, trying too hard as opposed to being genuinely inclusive. 100%. So this is how tokenization works, right? So like if you're putting something into it and it's like, look, ha ha ha, I did this, you're probably tokenizing someone. So I have a kind of pretty common line in my keynote where most people look at diversity like Ghostbusters. So then as soon as we got one, we think we're done. And that feels really gross. So you can't just do it once. You actually have to think holistically about your entire process, pre-program, during the program, post-program, sales, marketing, etc. And if you know who you are, how you are, and where you are, you'll have a better chance at doing that so then it doesn't feel so tokenizing. And it's hard. And I mean, that's how racism works. That's how sexism works, etc. When I created I paid someone to create a video, you know those cartoony things? They were like a fad for a while. Anyway, I paid someone to do this, and every single person that was being drawn was pretty much a masculine man and a feminine woman. And I was like, are you listening to the words? I can't do this. You know, or the picture when I had an app before I even had a smartphone, the picture that was used for my app was very obviously a white man's hand. Now, for the record, remember who my audience is. But I wanted to be able to diversify, right? So I actually took a picture of a friend of mine who does not have white man looking hands. She's got beautiful manicure, etc. And I took a picture because those aren't my hands. Those are someone else's hands, which was on an audience page on my website. So you can be thoughtful about all of those things. And if you're collectively doing it, it's more likely to not land like super tokenism. So great point. Please remind people to confirm and practice the pronunciation if they are doing land acknowledgements. Also really true. Plus people's names. That's part of the reason when I MC or facilitate a panel, I meet with everybody in advance. Steal this. I ask 2 questions, even if they have very little time. Number 1, what is the correct pronunciation of your name? And then I say it and then ask for edits. And then I phonetically write it down so that I may know how to say that person's name. And the other thing is, especially if it's virtual or there's a hybrid audience, what's the main point that you want to get out of this panel so that if something happens, I can say it or I can reinforce it. So then it's about them and making sure the right information comes out of the panel. But that's kind of a different TED Talk. But good job, Jasmine. Okay. Post-program, we talked a little bit about aftercare. Some people may do evaluations or surveys or something like that. I don't do those things. Maybe I should, but I don't. But also, how do you talk to the client afterwards? If you've gathered your audience's information, what do you email out? What's that point of contact? If you're selling them something afterwards or sending them aftercare or giving an ebook away to everyone, that's another point of contact that's still who you are, how you are, and where you are. So you need to be thoughtful about that as well. Give early news, podcasts, describe visuals. I said all that. Okay, good job, good job, good job. Those are all of the things that I needed to highlight. Q&A and or behind the scenes questions. Maureen, we almost made it and it's 4:30 on the dot. Who is a trained professional? I say 4:30 because I'm in Colorado and that's mountain time and I'm being conscious of where I'm at and not everybody is in this time zone. So, I don't have any more text currently. So I'm going to go to the Q&A. Sound good? Maureen, anything in the chat that I need to know about?
No, everybody's loving everything that's going on in the chat.
Excellent. The last time I touched my cursor was 37 messages ago. So I was like, I have no idea what is happening. But I am going to download the chat. I might have to filter it through my therapist first. But if there are any questions or anything that are in there, I will do my best to follow up with you. But the texting number is the best thing to do. The 202-670-4262 is the best, the ideal way of asking me a question or getting in touch with me. I should also say, just in case, I'm actually presenting, this session will be in the Digital Vault for NSA members. I'm actually presenting at the NSA Ohio chapter in March, so you could register for NSA Ohio. I think Brian Wagner may be on the call, so maybe you can post the registration information. I am also presenting for NSA Illinois chapter. That's also virtual. I'm presenting there in May, I believe, so you can register there. But the reason why I'm mentioning them is that I'm hoping the information gleaned from this, those sessions can kind of be like take two, right? So what are the main areas that came up of questions and answers, and what can I do to kind of hone this in? Because the first time I presented this information, and it's a lot of stuff. It's like been 4 airplanes worth of thoughts all on a sheet of paper. Okay. I'm gonna do Q&A unless there's something in chat. I'm seeing my name a lot. No.
No, everyone's just saying thank you to you.
Great. I think somebody somewhere asked about my web camera. My web camera is a $5 web camera out of the clearance bin at Staples. So there you go. That also speaks to my tech savviness. I do not have a switcher. I don't use PowerPoint or try really hard not to. And you don't need to. What you need to do is have good content. And I'm not saying those people don't have good content, but I'm saying that I do think there are some people who are focusing on the wrong things. Just be really good. Just that's it. I didn't buy this camera, this one right here. I didn't buy this camera for probably a year and a half into COVID. And people looked at my pixelated face because I was just using my MacBook Air laptop computer that now looks super grainy compared to this one. Yeah, that's what I did. You know why? Because I didn't want to spend any money building a studio that I hopefully would never use, because I had no idea how long all of this would actually last. Perhaps you were in the same boat. Okay, so let me go to Q&A. Let's start at the bottom, Maureen, just because of time-wise. Oh, no, just kidding. The top is in chronological order. Okay. Someone chewed me out recently for calling myself an edutainer and a speaker. She said there are so many free speakers these days that I should call myself a master ventriloquist. Awesome. Great feedback. And again, you can take it, you can leave it, you can think about it, you can do whatever you want to with it. People tell me all kinds of things that I should call myself, and a lot of those I don't want to repeat, so I don't do it. Is taking a comedy improv class by a professional theater a good idea? Sure, if you're interested in comedy improv. If you're not interested in comedy improv, that's going to be super awkward and really boring for you. I came from a comedy background, so I mean, education and comedy kind of smushed together, but I find my quickness, I think I'm pretty quick, I think I'm pretty witty, I think I'm pretty funny. These are all things that you should be throwing into the chat, that I am hysterical and amazing. That feel free. I'm here for 3 more days. My therapist is not on speed dial. No one's adding to the chat that I'm funny. I do think that my stand-up experience helped me with terrible audiences. It helped me with the unexpected. It definitely helped me being quicker on my feet. I think Janice said that. But I also think that I've been doing this for a really long time. And please hear me when I say this. Like, I distinctly remember how condescending that felt when I was just starting out. And I know some people may just be starting out, and I really don't mean it in a condescending way. I don't know when the tipping point was, because I'm still insecure about not being able to handle the unknown. That is still an insecurity I have. And I'm actually pretty fast, and I'm able to handle a lot of things. But there are some things that I still have never experienced or don't know how to handle. Some of them are terribly sad. Some of them are really frustrating. Some of them are hysterical. Those things actually help. And the only way to do those is to get on a stage. So is it an improv stage? Sure, sounds great. Is it a sales stage? Sure, sounds great. Is it singing in a choir? Sure, sounds great. I was not raised with any kind of religion at all, so I don't know what else you call the people who sing at a church type of thing. So I had a goal one year to get into a choir, because it's a type of stage use I've never experienced. I also don't do anything with a team, so I thought singing with other people might be helpful. And I can't find a choir that I connect with, that doesn't practice 4 times a week when I travel as much as I do. And also, I can't carry a tune in a bucket. Fun facts. That's not their problem, that's my problem. But being on stage helps you be on stage. And again, I can hear how condescending that sounds, but that there's no other way to say that if you want to be on stage, be on stage. If you want to be good on stage, be really bad on stage a lot, and you will get better at being on stage. How do you just start out being good? I have no idea. After almost 20 years, I don't even know that I'm good every single time I get on stage. I don't think I'm terrible, but I don't know that I would give myself like an A+ every single time I take the stage. And I'm really busy. I work a lot because I don't want to get rusty. So I'm chasing what's the opposite of chasing? Running away from being rusty. So then that's why I have so much stage time under my belt, I guess. Am I now wearing a belt? I'm not wearing a belt. I'm wearing sweatpants because I'm doing a virtual thing. Okay. Which is better these days? To position myself to get paid speaking gigs, speaker, edutainer, master ventriloquist. I have no idea. I don't know that there is an answer to that. I also don't know what your audience is, and I don't know how much you want to get paid, and I don't know how much you don't want to get paid. Like, what's your bottom? Like, I don't really want to put on pants for a lower amount of money. And all three of those words, I think it's a really valid question, but all three of those words also probably attract different audiences and repel different audiences. So who do you not want to work with? Use those words because you won't work with those people. And who do you want to work with? Use those words because those are the people who will be drawn to you. So I don't know. I don't even know if I know the answer for my own business. Not learning disabilities, but differences. About the language I used around learning disabilities. So in some places, learning differences is better. Some people prefer learning abilities instead of learning disabilities. And all of those languages are completely up to a given audience. What's particularly interesting, I think, at meetings is that people may be coming from all different places to this place, or people may actually just be living in the place that you came to, or a combination, especially with hybrid. And language is going to seem outdated or antiquated or too progressive or, whoa, I've never even heard that term, pretty much with every audience. So again, make good choices. Hope for the best, and you're responsible for whatever happens. So thank you for the nudge. And yeah, there you go. Okay. How do we be responsible for whatever happens? Can you share an example of where that happened with you and how you solved it or learned it? So I don't want to sound like a jerk, but this is literally what my entire book is about. So please buy my book. Self-promotion is still not welcome. What I mean by being responsible is when you are challenged, is that you are so prepared with what you have said, with how you formed your message. You're so clear on what your intention was, that what matters is the impact. Because you've done so much pre-work that the impact of whatever it is you have said is actually what's important. And so when it lands the way you wanted it to, score. And when it doesn't land the way you wanted it to, you're not defensive. You're actually like, oh my gosh, this is a learning opportunity for me. Tell me more. And you may or may not actually get the feedback that what landed or didn't land. Like, I'm thinking of a keynote that I did, and if any of you are on this call, I apologize that I'm still not over it. But I did an event in Kentucky, and I spoke at the Kentucky chapter right beforehand, or maybe it was afterwards, I can't remember. I think it's before. Anyway, and some of the people from the NSA Kentucky chapter came to my keynote. And this keynote flopped. It was terrible. P.S., from comedy background, the most important thing you can do to become a good speaker is flop and bomb, because that means that you're taking a risk and you're trying new material. But you also need to be responsible for flopping and bombing. Anyway, I thought this keynote went terrible. So a couple people who are now my friends, who I had just met from the NSA Kentucky chapter, they were like, what are you talking about? That wasn't bad. That was great. So again, different measuring sticks, right? I'm not buying me. So I thought I was terrible. The client was like, yeah, that didn't land very well, but wasn't disappointed because it wasn't my fault that it didn't land. That particular keynote, after I finally finished, I sold one book to the AV camera guy's daughter. Thank you. That was not really the target marketing I was going for. So then I take the microphone off. I go to the bathroom. I'm sitting in a stall thinking, oh my gosh, I have to get a job at Target, except no one at Target would ever hire me because I haven't updated my resume in 20 years. That's happening in the bathroom. I come out of the bathroom and I was informed that I was burning in hell because I was a horrible liberal and a gay person. Thank you. Welcome to Kentucky. So then I wash my hands, you're welcome, and I get out of the bathroom and I meet a guy who said, "Oh my gosh, you're amazing." And I got one of my longest retainer consulting clients from that particular guy right after being told I was going to burn in hell, after selling a book to the AV camera guy, after me thinking I bombed, and two of my NSA colleagues that I greatly respect saying I did a good job. Welcome to not working in a cubicle. That's all I can say. Hope for the best. Take responsibility for it. So hopefully that helps, maybe? Probably not. The bow tie is cool on you. I want to look cool as a female speaker. Which one would you recommend, wearing a tie or bow tie for a female? So first off, just an example for language, I would say as a woman, not as a female, because female gets to chromosomes and genitalia, and that can be an awkward icebreaker. So as a woman, what is a way for you to look cool? Do you feel cool in that? I sound like I'm being patronizing, but I'm not, because trust me, as a woman person in this industry, I have been told 1,000 times what I should wear and what I shouldn't wear. I am not the only person on the call who is using hair dye. I just might be the only person who happens to be kind of a purple pink situation this month. Whatever you feel cool in, that's what you should wear. The shoes that you can walk in, those are the ones you should wear. The pants that actually don't make noise while you walk and actually allow you to eat lunch without having to undo the button, those are the pants you should wear. I am very proud of myself because this is a real bow tie that I tied my actual self, and I'm doing the weird mirror thing. I think it's super cute. It's a new look for me. I bought a very conservative shirt, which I think is funny to wear a bow tie with, and they're the inverse polka dots. So I am particularly liking this. And to be honest, it was in my suitcase I didn't unpack from the last trip. And today I was like, I feel like this today because I feel good in it. Now, all of my friends that are in the chat are going to tell you that I am super insecure and super question everything that I wear all the time. When I found out that my keynote topic had been selected for influence this summer, the very first thing I did was try to figure out what on earth am I going to wear. Did I think about what it is that I'm going to say? That seems relevant. Nope. I figured out what I was going to wear so that I could get that out of my mind because I'm going to feel super amazing what I'm going to wear. Y'all just wait because it is super cool. And now I can focus on my expertise. So whatever you feel cool in, that's what you should wear. Very long answer. Speaking of what to wear, Sylvie is probably the first phone call I made to figure out what to wear. If I remember correctly, actually, I walked in a house that you were sitting in the living room. Conversations around COVID, vaccinated, not vaccinated, masks, testing. How do you handle these in prep calls or during events? Excellent question. Speaking of a controversial topic that make people very nervous. So those of you that haven't been to live events yet, let me kind of give kind of a gamut of what some of the options are. So testing isn't foolproof because it's usually within 72 hours. And what kind of test? Do you mean a home test? Do you mean a PCR test? Not all those are available depending on where people are coming in from. Testing. Vaccination cards. Not everyone has a vaccination card. And if you have a vaccination card, not everybody is boosted. I am team Pfizer and I recommend getting boosted. If you are hearing this and you are vaccinated and you've been debating getting boosted, please go get boosted. Okay, so that is my personal opinion. It's not representing NSA or any other kind of legal organization. That's just me trying to be a human being that gives a shit about other human beings. We've moved into the cussing hour. Having your vaccination card in a laminated or plastic folder with you at all times. Depending on where you're traveling, you might need it to get into a building. You might not need it to get in a building. In the state of California, San Francisco, you needed a vaccine card to get in. That was the first time that I'd ever experienced, and I live in California. The next gig was in Orange County, where people were licking each other. So it just depends. So to Sylvie's point, how do you engage in this conversation? So what I say to the client is, my job is to be the least of your worries. What do you need from me and how can I help? So I have my vaccination card as a picture on my phone. If they're using an app, not only am I one of the first people to upload my vaccination card if they're using an app, but I'll actually make a promo video walking people through the process. I'm funny and I'm a Luddite. So me stumbling through how to do it, I will do that. Some people get worried about that for like HIPAA or those kind of things for my birthday. The more people who know when my birthday is, the more likely I will get a present. I don't care. So I will volunteer to do a promo video around the vaccination status or the testing status, which means some of my clients have a picture of me shoving a Q-tip up my nose, but we have all done this, and we're all getting ready to do this depending on what their status is. Because I talk about challenging conversations, and actually, Sylvie, you could be really good for this for a lot of your clients too, is they're nervous about how to have the conversation because they're planning something in the future. We don't know what the future is going to hold. We don't know if they're going to pivot last minute or not. So helping them role play through that conversation of where it would go wrong, and then you being part of the solution for free, I think has been very, very helpful. Now, I say that as a vaccinated person who I have never tested positive for COVID. And I also am pretty strict around my access or wearing a mask or whatever. I have a lung condition, so I really would like to not get COVID. I'm saying that from my position. This is an example of knowing your own identities. So not all of you would fit into that. There's a lot of people who can't get vaccinated. There's a lot of people who are not interested in getting vaccinated. There are people who may be testing positive or may think that they are magical and not going to get it. That's totally fine. My brother's one of those people. But depending on who you are or how you are, you can be the person that the meeting planner needs to solve the difficult conversation they're challenged by having. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay. I got it. I'm going to mix it up because we got a text message. Somebody has a lead for me. Look, what an example of doing free or pro bono work. I will take your lead. Thank you very much. My email is jess@goodenoughnow.com. Okay, great. I can't believe I got that on a text. That's so funny. You're probably punking me, but it still made me feel super good. Okay. Dear friend Amy Clymer, I think I missed something, Jess. Why are you using the text number in addition to the Q&A within Zoom? Is this for people who might just be joining via phone? Excellent question. So again, using Zoom and its capabilities. So if we only used the chat feature, I'm just being thorough, Amy. If we only use the chat feature for questions, I can't see them. Not because I don't know how to use Zoom, but because I have I'm of the age where that font size is way too small and y'all are way too rowdy in the chat. So any questions that were coming in would roll through. I didn't know in advance if this was going to be a webinar or this was going to be a meeting. I thought that it was going to be a webinar, but I forgot to ask. So I didn't know. And it's being recorded and it's going to be in the digital vault. So the texting number, again, 202-670-4262, also enables asking me direct questions to be evergreen because I know the recording is going to be in the digital vault. So if people call in via phone, they have a harder time using the chat or seeing the Q&A. But if they are watching the recording, none of that is available to them. So then it actually solves all those problems. Also, a lot of times people want to ask me questions and they want them to be completely anonymous because they're worried about how they word the question, specifically because of my topic area. So by sending it to my text, to my Google Voice, all I know about them is their cell phone number. Now, with that said, I have been sent some pretty questionable things, not currently, but questionable things, and I at least have the cell phone number. So then if someone's going to do harm to themselves or others, or they're just horribly rude to me, I can also give that texting number to the client if need be, and be able to, they can do like a reverse search and find out who it was and either do a wellness check on them or take care of them. My email again is jess@goodenoughnow.com. Goodenoughnow.com, which is cleverly also a website. So that's the other reason. The other piece that I think is important is that sometimes my clients want real feedback, real-time feedback. So I will also use the Google Voice number, and then I will go to the Google Voice website where I can actually take copy all the texts that have come in. And so like the compliments, or like if I ask on a webinar, which by the way, we're coming to that point. It's 4:51 in Colorado. What is one major takeaway that you have taken away today? Brian Wagner, if you're still here, take notes on the trends that are coming in because that's what we'll do in our webinar. So what's one takeaway you've taken away from this particular webinar? That was a funny sentence. But I can go to Google Voice and cut and paste them into a document and give them to my client. So I just said she. Did you hear me say that? I just said she because they're almost always women, but they're not always women. But the client or the meeting planner that I'm working with, then has actual qualitative data to justify the program. And all of that happens because I use a free Google Voice number. Thank you, Amy. Okay. How do you deal with an African American audience? The exact same way I deal with any other audience, regardless of their racial makeup. So I speak to them and talk to them about my particular topic. I don't know if this is embedded in that question, but sometimes I get asked, especially during the sales process, like, I don't know if you know this, but you're a white woman. Like, why should I hire a white woman to do diversity work? Because a lot of people will immediately assume that that needs to be a Black or an African American person doing diversity work. So first off, my work comes from dominant identities. I have plenty of subordinated or marginalized identities, but doing the work for my dominant identities doesn't cost me anything. So then I'm actually role modeling what I teach. So hopefully that's helpful. The why not female but woman, again, sorry, missed it. Generally female or male are sex-based words, not the act of, it's not that kind of workshop, but anatomy and biology. And so when people are talking about gender, you really would use the word woman or man or masculine or feminine or androgynous or trans or non-binary or something to describe a person, instead of female or male, which is very clinical, usually rooted in chromosomes, genitalia, hormone levels that we don't really know about each other. So I've had these conversations actually with the NCAA and the Olympic teams, which is often why you'll notice some sports are men's and women's instead of male or female. Sometimes they still do that as well, but they shouldn't, in my opinion. So hopefully that helps. Okay, I think we got through the Q&A. I have a text message here. Let me do this real quick. Please type in the chat any takeaways from today so that Brian and I know what I should talk about while I am in Ohio. And that date is March 19th, I think, if you'd want to register for that event for more conversation like this. March 19th, 2022, because this is recorded. If that is helpful, that would be great. And we don't have any more Q&A. We have 6 minutes to go. Should we just stare at each other?
Oh my goodness. Here, let me figure out how to work technology. Here we
That's
go.
your job, not me.
Oh my goodness. Oh, hold on. I'm trying to add a pin. Here we go. Oh my goodness, Jess, this has been amazing. I've learned so much. I've laughed. I've learned. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you all, NSA and friends of NSA. Thank you for joining us today, and we're going to Orlando next week. So
Woo! I can't wait.
I can't wait. I am so excited. We're going to have a clubhouse room on Wednesday, and I'll be in Orlando. So we'll get to talk about winter workshop and what's going on. I want to hear how excited y'all are, and come and join the conversation. Even if you're joining virtually, we'd love to have you in on the conversation. So Jess, this has been amazing. Thank you. Again, this will be on the Digital Vault sometime by the end of this week. We will send you an email and let you know when that will be available. I'll make some edits. So anyways, thank you so much, Jess. This was really wonderful. And
if I can put a plug in. So yes. For those of you that are debating whether or not to go to winter conference, so I deplore, is that a big enough word? Hate? Like, I don't hate much, but like really don't like Disney for a million personal, moral, and value-based reasons. And I am going to winter conference. I also don't like SeaWorld for a lot of reasons. And sign me up. You know why? Because winter conference is my second favorite type of event. This is another humble flex. I think I'm at like 5 now. But CSP Summit is my favorite because it's very small and intimate. Winter conference is my second favorite because it is small and intimate. And the lineup, like, I've been a member for like, should I say 15 years out loud? Does that make me look old? Look at my skin. I had a facial yesterday. I look great. But the lineup at this winter conference, like, I don't understand how I could possibly vaguely pay attention at Winter Conference and not get literally 10 times the amount of monetary value out of half of the lineup. Like, it is going to be amazing. I don't know how you got all those people there. Madam President Shep Hyken, that's how. And I recommend going to Winter Conference if you can't. I think that it's just an amazing resource and part of the reason in this community why I'm a member of NSA. So I just wanted to add that in.
Absolutely. We were just talking on Clubhouse yesterday that, this is a very lonely business sometimes. And, industries out there, they have like their conferences that they go to. This is your conference. This is your conference for professional speakers. If you want to make money speaking, this is the place to be. So we hope to see you there. We'll see you in Orlando. If not, I'll see you in the chat. And thank you so much. And we'll see y'all later. Bye.
Bye.